Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News on the South Florida Conservative News Center. It is Saturday, December 6th, 10 a.m. And as you have been following for the last number of months, especially when it's gotten more and more Muslim terrorist assaults in the United States and in Europe, the people at CARE and Muslim Brotherhood and everybody else continue to tell you how harmless militant Islam, which doesn't exist, is not in the United States and how compatible the religion is, which it's not, to the American values. So what we've done is put together a little compare and contrast here of what the militant, we'll stick with the militant part of Islam for this, and how it cannot ever, with a capital E, allow itself to occupy the same space as a country or people that believe in the Bill of Rights or the Constitution of the United States. It cannot, by its definition, do so. So why are we lying to ourselves about this in a constant daily basis? For those of you who like to argue those points, I would say look up Sam Shamoun. We did a bit on him before. He does those type of arguments, and just basically from the text of jihad, basically, and the text of the Bible. I am not a biblical scholar. I do not believe in doing all these clever, um, whatever, master debater sessions that these other people are famous for. It's a fact. It's a fact. Move forward. What can we do to either solve it or what have you, right? And, you have to say this because most Americans will say they're fair-minded. They believe in, you have friends that are Protestants or Catholics or Baptists or Jewish people or whatever, Buddhists, a lot of different things rolling around the United States, especially after like the mid 60s, early 70s, when they got away from the whole white Anglo-Saxon Protestant archetype that made the country what it was, which is true, like it or not. I was not born a Protestant, so yeah, us as well, right? But these kind of values, this religious freedom, tolerance, and peace, things of that nature, they can only survive when we defend the single piece of the puzzle, the principle that binds our nature together, and that is the Constitution of the United States, and that it is the supreme law of the land. All these jokers that are out there trying to work their way around the edges and tell you these different stories and what it really means and how Sam Adams was actually an Islamist. No, 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 no. No foreign religious legal code, no matter how passionately held, can compete with it. In recent years, though, and you see it unfortunately more so in Europe, but it is also here in hidden neighborhoods where we do not discuss it, a subtle ideological current has emerged. It doesn't come from the peaceful Muslim Americans who participate in the fact that we use that term Muslim American. Muslim is a religion. It spans Africa and the Middle East and parts of Eastern Europe, right? So that is you've identified yourself as a religion first and Americans second. Majority of times when you had to hear this stupid shit in the United States, you were Black American, Latin American, Italian American. Those are not religions. This is the first time we've really had a strong identifier that this is all we are. We are nothing more. Muslim before American, that's fine. Take a walk. And we'll explain why you're going to have to take a walk or you're going to have to be strictly monitored. And like I said, the peaceful people I feel bad for, the ones who participate fully and honorably in the civic life in this nation. However, they have a major pitfall, which we can discuss later. It comes from our issue, my issue, everybody else that we deal with's issue, comes from militant Islamist movements, which view the United States not as a home to join, but as a political system, not just to influence, weaken, and reshape. They need to capture us whole. They need to capture the United States whole because the people that are on the ground doing it are incapable of running a civilization on their own. They do not send us the smartest. The jihadis are not the smartest Arabs. They are not bringing back algebra anytime soon. They're not bringing back astronomy or how to build the Al-Aqsa mosques or whatever. They send you the dumbest of the dumb, the leeches, the people that are going to suck off of welfare and then go out and commit knife violence in the name of a religion that they don't even understand themselves. So, and this is not speculation, just go read it in the news. I've said nothing here that is any way actionable, but is directly derived from news sources. Go check it out. Charlie Hebdo. That should say it all, right? It is not a hysteria. It is a political program openly articulated in the text and teachings that extremists themselves are citing to justify what they do. And I hate to do it, but we're going to throw one or two of these in here so that your friend at lunch tomorrow doesn't call you a racist. The difference between Islam as a religion and Islamism, which are two different things, a political ideology, is essential. Okay? Militant Islamists justify their political agenda by cherry picking certain parts of the Quran and the Hadiths. They frequently rely on this one of these. So this will win you your bar bet against your Al Qaeda neighbor. The Quran 929, fight those who do not believe until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. And you'll hear that word out there because it's the jizya, right? Obviously, Wu-Tang members wrote the hadith. From this verse and from the supporting hadith, such as Sahih Muslim 1731, if they refuse Islam, ask them to pay the jizya. If they refuse, then you must fight them. And Abu Dawud 3047, the jizya to be taken while the payer is humbled. This is all extortion. They are there to extort you. They view getting onto the welfare system here, stealing money from us to support their nefarious activities in other countries as part of that. Okay? That's how extremists derive a complete political worldview. Non-Muslims are second-class subjects, and this will come into the constitutional issue. Non-Muslims are second-class subjects at best. They must be taxed for their refusal to convert at best. They must be subdued politically. Their legal protections are conditional and revocable. Death is right around the corner all the time because everything is a death penalty with these jokers, right? So groups ranging from ISIS to everyone's favorite, the Muslim Brotherhood, and various ideological networks in the West interpret these texts literally and politically, not symbolically. If you ever see people that used to get on people from the Bible, especially like in the Old Testament, and they'll say, well, do you mean we should do this and we should do that? And they're like, no, like, well, it's written in the Bible. Yeah, well, this stuff here is written in the Hadith or in the Quran, and the same should be applied. However, it is not. These people envision a society where non-Muslims are taxed, restricted, silenced, and legally subordinated. The reason that they had this there historically, correct me if I'm wrong, is because the roving bands of brigands, which were the early Islamic teachers, weren't smart enough to know how to run the civilization then either. So they needed the tradespeople and the merchants and everything else to keep the electric running while they were out acting up in other places. This is the exact opposite of what is entitled to be an American citizen. All right. Militant Islam collides directly with the foundational structure of American law. You can use any of this stuff when you write to your sellout congressman while we have to coddle these people because they also believe in human shields. Go back to the, once again, hate to keep bringing it up, right? See this book? Buy this book. It is Modern Islamic Warfare by Harold Rode, and it will explain everything when we talk about this as to why they do what they do and how they do it. Now, what you're going to have with militant Islam and why it collides with the foundational structure of American law, you've already heard what I've told you, right? I'm just going to say what it collides with the big picture. The big picture collision, 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. Extremist doctrine assigns different legal statuses to Muslims and non-Muslims. The Constitution requires equality before the law. It's one. The Establishment Clause, First Amendment. Islamists seek a parallel or superior religious legal system, the Sharia courts. In America, no religion may rule over citizens. Pretty simple, right? Free speech. Militant interpretations criminalize the criticism of Islam. Charlie Hebdo, go in there and kill people. That poor teacher had his head cut off, right? The Constitution protects criticism of all religions. Granted, they'll say, well, you can criticize them all they want, but we're going to cut your head off. No, you're not allowed to do that here. You may not allow them onto your TV show, but you are not allowed to cut their head off or beat them for talking about it. It's when the talk goes to action that there is an issue. The issue of due process. Coercive Sharia-based councils bypass courts, police, and constitutional safeguards. England is allowing that to occur as we speak, while they are going to get rid of jury trials for things under 6 months to a year in prison. That is insane. It can happen here just as simply in these Muslim-controlled areas out in the Midwest. And for all of you liberals out there, women's and LGBT rights. Militant doctrine subordinates women and criminalizes homosexuality with death, positions wholly incompatible with U.S. civil rights law. Everyone who used to sit there and say, for you not gendering me correctly puts my life in danger, you have no idea what you're going to see if you are submitting yourself to Sharia law. So peaceful Muslims have no difficulty living under the Constitution. They've been here for years. We've had Muslims, not huge amounts, but for years they were here because they actually were getting jobs and working. It's this giant deuce that was dropped on us, especially in the Biden administration, of people who have no marketable skill except for taking money, beating the old lady, and stealing money from welfare. That is truism again. Now, personally, I blame everybody in the government in those areas who did this because they sold their soul for some votes. This is all about socialism, ties itself into Islamism to overthrow the West. That's how it works. And then the socialist figure, after that, will just turn off the electric and let these people freeze, which not a bad idea, but a lot of eggs have to get broken before you get to that point. Okay? So we know that militant Islam totally rejects the Constitution, and they will go on television and say that they love the Constitution because it is part of their military doctrine to lie and to cheat and to do whatever they have to do to stay in the fight. You see what's going on? We bombed Iran, right? They're right back to making weapons again because they have no existence worthwhile without being that guy, without being that person. And this is what we have with the people that the Biden administration particularly, although it goes back into Obama, I'm sure Trump's going to get part of it because he had no control at all of what was going on really while he was in office. I'll say that for the first term anyway. So the strategy here is legal deception. Militant Islamic networks, particularly those operating as political movements like CARE, advance their goals through strategic ambiguity. They present themselves publicly as civil rights groups. They followed a pattern, honestly, very similar to a lot of the stuff that the anti-Semitic groups have done. That was where they were smart. They sat there and said, well, if the Jewish people, and this is the theory on their side and among a lot of Americans anymore, it seems, if the Jewish people can set being, Semitic aside, where it's a different set of laws to punish people, why can't we as Arabs, who are also Semitic people, you're the same damn people, different religion, then we should be able to do the same thing. which means the Americans are powerless to do anything against our terrorist activities. Smart move, Linda Sarsour. And it has been very, very well documented that it is working. The money from the Qataris, all these kind of groups, they are big deals. The reason that we'll talk about the Qatari issue later on, not in this thing, but at another time. Most of the original the big groups, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, people like that, the Iranians. The Iranians are still are still subject number one as far as supporting terrorism. The Saudis may have a couple uncles and aunts that still give them money out of their purse, but the kingdom itself, I would say, is not supplying the money because they realize that they cannot control these people because these people want to overthrow all of the royal families that are in Arabia. Muslim Brotherhood wants them all gone. Muslim Brotherhood wants to put the caliph system back in, right? Or more importantly, a religious theocracy running the entirety of Arabia. And I know our good friend, Mohammed bin Salman, does not want that. He wants to buy 15 more Rolls Royces, and he will run through anybody who tells him differently. So, as I said, they come out as these civil rights groups, boo hoo hoo, right? In private, they are encouraged to use American law tactics to weaken the scrutiny and normalize religious legal expectations of their people. They, in private, have operated Sharia law in certain areas, okay? They have their own banking still operational, which lends itself to money laundering very well. They are involved in narcotics. They are involved in weapons. They are involved in human trafficking. They are an organized crime and terror system operating in the United States. A loose confederation, maybe, but ultimately all going back to one or two sources that began in Egypt. Everybody will tell you the same story if they're not on a Jew-hating kick, which is what has been done is you stoke these ops like the Tuckers, like the Candaces, like this Fuentes character. Where are they getting their money from, guys? Come on. You know, I'm not saying that the Israelis are completely blameless, but the wave of anti-Semitism far exceeds anything that's going on recently, right? They didn't, well, you can't say they didn't knock down the World Trade Center because everybody thinks they did. So let's just stay with this because I would need to get through this real while I'm still on the path of this. They are going to continue to infiltrate soft political targets. In my county, in Broward County, we have a number of Muslims that are now in office places. We have a major Muslim influence in our school district, which means in the learning systems, in the books. My county is super union, and whoever, you know, you pay for the party, you get to go to the party. As far as I can understand, you can tell me differently. I don't know why the Governor DeSantis hasn't come down. The Doge is here. Why we haven't had a real look at that or had FDLE, yeah, those guys, why they didn't go down and investigate the situation as well. Because where is all this money coming from? Okay. So that's what they are doing. They're joining all these groups. They are influencing the things that your children are being taught, and they are going for incremental legal exceptions into what it is that they have going on out there. They want these unofficial Sharia courts. They want to make it where the police have a no-go situation. They're trying in different states, and Texas was the last one, to build a community that's completely them so that they can get away with doing the shit that they get away with back home in the United States. Here's a good one for you girls. Who wants to have their clitoris removed? Look it up. It's part of the game, okay? Especially with the, I guess we'd say the North Africans. But yeah, there's a lot of damage you can do to the females in this religion to make them not like sex. The whole point of sex is daddy gets it and mommy has to put up with it, all right? So there are people within it who have decided that certain barbarianisms are fine, or barbarisms, however you want to be. So what we have at stake here, as you see, is pretty important. You see what is going on with the Somalis. Somalis aren't the only ones. They were just the easiest ones to manipulate and get into line because they had major clan structures that are here. If militant Islam gains political foothold, which it has, the consequences are going to be profound. Equal citizenship is going to go right out the window. They are already starting to suppress free speech. You're fragmenting legal authority, whereas the police and the courts are not able to do what they wanted to do. You see that couple that stole $7 million. The judge set aside the verdict, and $5 million is still missing, and nobody wants to talk about where it went. The pressure on women, children, minorities, and the gay, lesbian, transsexual people is going to increase as they expand. They're going to keep their neighborhoods tight for now because they have to brainwash the other Muslims that are there who may not be going for this all the time into it. And they have to make sure there are no opportunities for their people in the United States except for welfare, because they cannot go to school with the Americans. They cannot go to work with the Americans. They cannot do anything that interacts with the Americans for two reasons. One, they may become American. Two, they may tip the hand and say, you're lucky you're not going to be here next Thursday because I'm coming in to blow this fucking joint up. Right? There are things that are occurring. This is not alarmist. This is true statements, right? This is how shit is running. So we don't need to have these people. You don't need to have your nephew who failed to get through college at Harvard. We do not need new principles. We need the courage to uphold the principles we already have. The legislators should make clear that foreign religious courts have no civil authority, even if you have to write it in their own language and put it on a wall somewhere. Coercive arbitration masquerading as mediation is prohibited. Constitutional rights guaranteed by the United States laws override anything that your God is telling you is going on. Because they never say it's your God, they say it's the guy who talked to your God. All right, so don't feel that you're apostate by wondering what's going on. Not that any of you are watching this video, but the fact would be, these are the things we have to get back to. Hard immigration screening, of course. If there are such things as Muslim reformers or dissidents, which are less and less of them because they know what comes of that, which is usually murder, right? We need to get civic education back on track, so much so that it should be in the top three things that the president's doing besides trying to restore manufacturing and things like that. He has to get this horrible precedent that the unions have set in the school districts of everybody gets an award for being mediocre. The kids can't read, the kids can't do math. If one more person tells me their kid has a calculator, they don't need to know math, I want to punch them in the fucking face, because that's not what it's all about. If you don't understand the math, if you don't understand the computer, oh, my daughter fixed up my OnlyFans page in about 10 minutes. Ha ha ha. So what? It was designed for a monkey to do it. Is your daughter as smart as a monkey? Probably not, because the monkey can get those background raps that you always want, right? That's the difference. Don't keep telling people your dumb kids are smart. Make your kids smart. If you know you're stupid, find somebody who can make your kids smarter. I can tell you a true story. I can't say where I was living at the time, but we had a couple that were slow couple. We'll say that term because they weren't whatever. And they knew it. And they had a boy who just had really bad eyes. So everyone, I guess, figured he was just same way. They knew that that kid was normal, and they went to every local church or local person who could help, and they built that kid up so well that he ended up going to a major college. And they painted it on the front of the house. They had all kinds of crazy shit. But the fact of the matter is, they knew that they weren't physically or mentally equipped to handle this on their own, nor were they going to give them to the state to handle. It was just concerned parenting. It did the job. I don't know whatever happened to them because I don't live in that area anymore. but it was a very inspiring little thing. They didn't want to talk about it because, they had the stigma of being slow their whole lives. So, but anyway, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. You have to be involved in everything anymore. You can't let it slide. You can't let yourself fall into alcoholism, drugs, pornography, any of this bullshit like you used to be able to do in the old days, because it's going to be too close cutting against you and your family. And the outcome is not going to be something that you like, because at some point, if you're not going to pay this jizya, right? If you're not going to pay that, and even if you do decide to convert, the true faith will always destroy the converts because they knew you did it just to get out of trouble. Ask the Russians during the Afghan war. They would let you out of the tank and you'd be safe if you were a Muslim. Didn't happen very often, but don't want to get too far off, which I think I seem to be doing right now. We as Americans have to cut this other bullshit out. You have to stick firmly with the fact of defending the Constitution. You do not need to mark it up. You do not need to change any of the words. You need to fight to defend the Constitution. We are not fighting to protect the Jews or the Christians or anything else as a religious entity. You are fighting to defend the Constitution and the people that are entitled to enjoy the protections thereof, not people who have come in through deceitful practices to bring it all down. Any questions, comments, whatever, you can always contact us. We do get back to you. There'll be more of this. Oh, and fun fact, Zohar Mandami is what's called a 12er, if you want to look that up, but he is known to be a 12er. You are not going to be happy with that term, but that's what Mr. Smiles gets up to on the weekends. So that is about all, and I'll talk to you later on. Have a nice weekend.